This week in Erie, we welcome Joe Morris, Department Chair of the Political Science Department at Mercyhurst University. And it's probably not difficult to guess what we're talking about with the new year 2020 presidential politics center stage. What do you make of the current field, and what do you see happening in the next few weeks before the caucus?
Well, I think February in general is going to be a really interesting month. We've had an enormous number of Democrats battling against one another, and in all likelihood, by the time we get to the end of February, we're going to have just a small handful remaining. So the upcoming caucuses and primaries, I think, are going to be fascinating to watch.
And it seems like we have some front runners. It's been such a big field, and it keeps narrowing. It seems like we keep losing candidates, but it seems like we still have the four strong front runners. Can you go over that for us?
Sure. Joe Biden has been leading the pack for a long time, and there's really not a lot that's changed too much, with just a couple of exceptions. And interestingly, those exceptions are early primaries in February. So in some of the state primary polls, early primary polls, he's actually falling, it looks to be falling behind a little bit, losing some ground. But we have the pack of four up there, as they have been for a while. That is Biden, Sanders, Warren, and Buttigieg. And they are vying for that nomination, and who's going to come out on top, I think, is anyone's guess.
Do you think these debates help? I mean, we have another one this week. Do you think the debates are helping or not? Because it seems like there's so many people on the stage, none of them really get to have their voices heard.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously going to change as we move forward. But one of the things that we know about presidential debates is that they can often be really damaging to frontrunners. Frontrunners have the most to lose in presidential debates. And really, they kind of struggle to hold on to their position in those things. However, for candidates like Buttigieg, who have been up in the polls and down, and they seem to be hanging on there, not quite in the back of the pack, not quite in the front, they can be really critical. They can also be critical for candidates whose name recognition isn't that great. It gives them a chance to meet the public and for the public to get to know them a little bit more.
Money, though, is also extremely important at this point. Do those four leading candidates, do they have the most money, too, behind them at this point?
They do, in general. One of the things that we know is that money is a limited commodity. There's only so much to go around. So right now, if we look at President Trump, he has a war chest that is enormous. And as a matter of fact, it's larger than several of the leading Democrats combined. So at some point in this process, we're going to have to see Democratic donors begin putting pressure on people and saying, look, it's not going to happen. We're not going to fund you anymore.
Well, speaking of money, you have to mention Bloomberg. I mean, where does he fit in?
Yeah, as of right now, Bloomberg seems to be content to run a television campaign, and I'm not sure exactly what his plans are. If he plans to just, do this in through the early primary season, see how he does, if he gains any traction, and then mount a more traditional campaign, I don't know. But I can tell you that if he does gain a little traction, it's those middle-of-the-road Democrats, people like Joe Biden, that are the ones that are going to be concerned.
Well, and let's discuss, too, when it comes to the Democratic side, you need voters. And that was kind of a problem I think the party saw in the last election in terms of Hillary Clinton as a candidate. A lot of people said they were going to vote, but it seems like they didn't turn out. Is that a problem that they face again this time around?
It most certainly can be. One of the things we saw in 2016 was a sizable enthusiasm gap. Republicans were far more enthusiastic to vote for Donald Trump than Democrats were enthusiastic to vote for Hillary Clinton. And this can be really problematic. I've been telling my students time and time again that what's really going to be important in places like Erie County is that the Democrats nominate somebody who can inspire that sort of enthusiasm, because there's no doubt that Donald Trump is going to do it.
Well, and that's the thing, too. Are any of these frontrunners able to beat Donald Trump? I mean, the polls show that, but they showed it, too, in the last election as well.
Yeah, the polls do. And the candidate that seems to do the best consistently against Donald Trump is Joe Biden. Both Donald Trump and Joe Biden seem to have this working class, blue collar appeal to them. They inspire in people, I think, a kind of sympathetic understanding. Those candidates understand me, I understand them. Whether or not Joe Biden can get out of this primary process unscathed or even in a better position and then be in a position to do battle against Donald Trump, I think remains to be seen. But if he does, I think Joe Biden is a really strong candidate in the critical states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Right, because really when you do look at it, obviously Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. So you do need that person to energize the base so that they come out and make it a commanding win if the Democrats are in fact to win. And Biden has that ability, you think?
He does in the critical states, and there are only so many states that are actually in play. There are some states that are going to go Republican and some states that are going to go Democrat. But the states that are really critical, like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, that Donald Trump won last time, those states, you need a candidate that's going to be really appealing. And Joe Biden right now seems to be that candidate. But again, we're just beginning the primary process, and a lot can happen in a month or 2 months in politics.
Well, and with the president too, his popularity, despite anything that happens to him, seems to not wane much. And we've discussed it before. You also kind of have his silent supporters too, who are people who still support the president, even with the impending, the impeachment, articles of impeachment possibly going to the Senate this week.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. The president can rely on about 36% of the electorate. No matter what happens, this 36% is going to show up and vote for him. But 36% isn't a majority. So we have to think about those voters that are in the middle that can be peeled away from Donald Trump and support a Democratic candidate. And for many of those voters, supporting a Democratic candidate is not a stretch. They may be Democrats who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 that are looking at his presidency and saying, I don't really agree with what he's doing. This election is going to be, in some sense, a referendum on the past 4 years. Has Donald Trump delivered on his promises? And I think the Democrats are looking at this saying, we have room to make a case, and perhaps a case that he shouldn't be president anymore.
No, but do you think, though, too, for his base, and you said, again, it's 36% that support him regardless, the impeachment hearings, though, and the articles of impeachment, could that have the opposite effect that maybe Democrats want, where people say, this is exactly why we want someone like Donald Trump in the White House, to get rid of the status quo?
Yeah, impeachments, we know from history,
Right.
Bill Clinton, and what I think is our best example of this, but there haven't been many, but Bill Clinton is a great example of the public turning against the prosecutors, the Republicans pushing things a little bit too far. We haven't really seen that in this impeachment process, but it's not over. We now have a Senate trial, and we'll see what happens from there.
Right, because if the people who testify that the Democrats want to testify, it could really be some shocking testimony.
It
in
most certainly could
anticipation.
be.
It could be. We have no idea.
It most certainly could be. And at the same time, if the Democrats are able to call these witnesses, and we don't know that they're going to be able to, but if they're able to, the Republicans will be able to call some witnesses too, which could have a dramatic effect on the outcome of the trial. So this is going to be really interesting to watch, and its political ramifications, I think, are really interesting.
And I have to ask too, because, and I've asked you this probably 10 times, but it fascinates me because I studied political science in college, and I love it and I have a passion for it. But as a professor, to be teaching during this time when politics has just kind of been upended, how is that as an educator? I imagine every day you go into class and it's like, oh my gosh, I have a whole new topic put before me that I've never discussed before.
We do, and normally we call these teachable moments when
We've had a lot.
we've had a ton of these opportunities, and normally they're really great experiences because you can bring all the material that you cover in class, the theoretical material, to life by applying it to a real world situation. This is a little bit different. We have a divided classroom often, where there are some people that don't want you to say anything bad about Donald Trump, period, and some people who absolutely despise the man. And so it's very touchy, but it makes for an interesting conversation for sure.
And it's very real world. I mean, that's what we see everywhere. It doesn't seem like people are kind of in the middle anymore. It's one extreme or the other.
You're absolutely right.
Well, it's interesting, and we love hearing from you and talking to you, and I imagine we will do this a couple more times in the coming months, discussing this presidential election.
Anytime.
Dr. Joe Morse, thank you so much for joining us, and that does it for This Week in Erie.